To the Point with Michael Williams.
You're looking at live pictures from the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections office where a recount is underway. What's happening there and in Broward and across Florida this week, as every election supervisor must recount their ballots by Thursday. That's the deadline, but already signs of trouble in Palm Beach County.
Operate a 24/7 schedule. We will give it every single effort. I will tell you that the Secretary and the Legislature and the Governor have been extremely aware that with the election equipment that we have, the potential of conducting all of these is impossible. It is impossible. We've asked the Secretary if there was any consideration to extend the deadline, and he said no.
At stake, 3 statewide races, the U.S. Senate contest. As you well know, you can see the numbers. Republican Rick Scott leads Democrat Bill Nelson by a margin of about 12,000 votes. It was 57,000 on election night. In the race for governor, Republican Ron DeSantis leads Democrat Andrew Gillum by more than 33,000 votes, all within the margin of error, demanding a recount automatically. And in the contest for Agriculture Commissioner, Democrat Nikki Fried leads Republican Matt Caldwell by about 5,000 votes. That's a flip from election night. All the races fall, as I said, within the half percentage point margin of victory, triggering the automatic machine recounts. The vote counting has led to protests and court hearings, and once again, Florida's election process looks to many like chaos. As you look at protesters from the other day in support of Ron DeSantis and Rick Scott outside the Broward Election Supervisor's office. Good morning and welcome. We're devoting the broadcast to the recount and what you can expect in the coming week, or perhaps make that weeks. Here to help us try to clear up some of the confusion, and it's a big job, John Whittles, an attorney, has done work with the Democratic Party going back to Bush Gore and the presidential fight in 2000, and Peter Feaman, national committee man for the Republican National Committee. We appreciate you both coming in. First
Thank
response,
you for having us.
Mr. Whittles, you have the election supervisor in Palm Beach County. The Secretary of State said, no, I want the votes by Thursday.
Right.
She says, I don't think I can do it. At least as we sit here, Miami-Dade, which is the biggest county in the state vote-wise, does not seem to be saying they can't get the job done. What's up?
Constitutionally elected officer, she has a job to get it done come heck or high water. She has to get it done. That's all there is. So Thursday's the day, and if she doesn't get it done by Thursday, the office would be subject to a lawsuit for it's called a writ of mandamus, where a government office is asked, well, why can't you get this done? And the court says you got to do it.
Mr. Feaman, your reaction?
It's amazing because it's not that hard of a job, Mike. The first recount, which is the machine recount, it's just a matter of taking the ballots and feeding them back into the machine when they were first voted. So it's a matter of taking paper, putting it into the voting machine, and that's it. So I don't understand where Susan is coming from here. We haven't heard anything out of Dade County, like you said. We haven't heard anything out of Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, all big, large cities.
And let's not forget Brenda Snipes in Broward County, where even her hometown newspaper is saying, we think it's time for her to go. The confusion in Broward, the confusion in Palm Beach County. What do you say to people out there? What do you say, somebody who's represented the Democratic Party?
Sure.
People say, this is a mess, and you saw protesters out there in support of Governor Scott. What do you say to them?
I think first we need to sort out the issues. One, this isn't a situation of fraud. If somebody is not getting the job done quickly enough or correctly, that's one issue. But to politically grandstand and say there's fraud going on is something entirely different. It's a chasm of difference.
You say it's a competence issue, not an issue of fraud or alleged fraud.
An administrative issue, certainly.
Let me chime in on that, Mike. The most important thing, I don't think it should matter whether you're Republican, Democrat, no party affiliation. Every voter in Florida should be concerned that we have fair and honest elections. And certainly with what's going on here in Palm Beach and Broward County, the appearance is awful. And so it's easy to come to the conclusion that there's something nefarious going on because they're not following the law. In fact, the judge down in Broward on Friday afternoon said, you're not following the law, Brenda Snipes.
Well, but something nefarious is a long leap from questions of competence, is it not?
Yeah, and the issue here is, and Pete said it right now, is fair and honest. There's nothing that says this election isn't honest, and it's still out whether or not it's fair. The issue is it has to get done. There's zero evidence of any fraud or wrongdoing.
I don't know, Mike.
Go ahead, Pete.
Where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, when you have suddenly 75,000 new votes that appear since election night, you know, the supervisor of elections are mandated by statute to report all of the early votes and all of the absentee votes by 7:15. on election night, and now suddenly all of these tens of thousands of votes emerge. I think it's very easy to conclude that there's something not right here.
Well, now you're jumping. Are you jumping to conclusions there? Because let me point out, the governor the other night holds a not really a news conference. He spoke out in front of Florida reporters at the governor's mansion, took no questions. He's only appeared on Fox. Again, this morning on Fox, he's taken no questions from Florida reporters, I might add. He alleged fraud, wants the FDLE to investigate, which they are not doing right now, and they are saying, at least at this moment, there are no credible allegations of fraud. The president weighed in on social media saying the same thing. But as we stand here today, even the Secretary of State's office, and he's a Republican, said, we have no credible allegations there's any fraud. Questions of competence, to be sure. How do you respond to that, then you? First you, Mr. Feaman.
The lack of transparency leads people to conclude.
But those aren't provable allegations of fraud, at least certainly not at this point.
Those
are the allegations being tossed about.
At this point, and that's why the Scott campaign sued to get records so that we can get to the bottom of this if, in fact, the will of the voters is turned upside down here.
But do you believe Governor Scott a short while ago on Fox came right up to the edge of accusing Bill Nelson himself. He stopped just short of accusing his Democratic opponent of helping to perpetuate fraud here. That's a highly charged allegation. Do you believe Bill Nelson himself is trying to help create fraud in this election?
I don't know Bill Nelson
but that's what the governor said.
I haven't
you were listening
spoken
when he
to
said
him.
it.
I listened to that, and I come back to this. When he's leading on election night by 55,000 votes, and now 2 days, 48 hours after that, suddenly his lead is reduced to 12,000. There's something not right here.
The protesters out who are worried about it, so answer the counter question, what's going on here? There are a lot of people, despite the fact the FDLE is not investigating, something stinks here. What do you say to Mr. Feaman and those people who say that?
Sure, political grandstanding fuels all of this. And to put a finer point on it, for any supervisor of election, they don't handle the ballots. There would have to be an office-wide conspiracy where underlings are directed to do X, Y, and Z to direct the election in a certain direction. And that just doesn't make any sense, especially with no evidence. This is an administrative issue. It's a competence issue, maybe. But fraud, and to get up there and fuel that fire and fan this, especially in this political climate, I think it damages the country.
But did Susan Booker help her case the other day when she said on camera, you know, they need to, I'm paraphrasing slightly, need to back out. They don't like our demographics here, presumably referring to the fact that Broward is an overwhelming treasure trove of Democratic votes. Can't Republicans say, aha, see, that's a political statement?
Yes, they can say it's a political statement. They could say it's an errant, ill-advised political statement, but there's still nothing to show that she did anything intentional.
Well, I'd ask my Democrat colleague, aren't you concerned, like most Americans, that the appearance of impropriety is so bad that it's undermining our confidence in our election system, and that's a threat to our republic?
In a vacuum, yes, but the appearance of impropriety when improperly fueled by political grandstanding is even worse. This is an administrative issue that needs to be corrected. Every vote needs to be counted. It's a lot
more than an administrative issue when you have the massive amounts of votes that are suddenly being counted that are almost all Democrat votes. It's like, come on, use common sense here, Mike.
Let's all back up to 2000 in a minute, because this debate will go on and on. It already is. In terms of technical questions, 2000, which you all remember well. I remember as we went back and forth to Tallahassee, followed the ballot boxes from, in that case, from Miami to Tallahassee and back. Hanging chads here, butterfly ballots. At least mechanically, should this be an easier process to get through? Let me ask first you, Mr. Whittles. You were part of the team for Mr. Gore then, the Democratic Party. What does the take mechanically?
Much easier. There is a machine recount that's precipitated by a machine test. If the machine recount comes back with less than 1/4%, or 0.5 now, less than 1/4, they do a hand recount, but only of the undervotes and the overvotes. Someone that made a mistake by not voting or voting for more than one person in the same race.
That's correct, and the legislature has improved the process, because now when you do the manual recount, there has to be a representative from the Democrat Party, a representative from the Republican Party on the team to oversee and perform those hand recounts. So I don't think we're going to go back to the land of Oz and hanging chads.
Based on history, no predictions here. Let me put that big neon letters. One liberal commentator the other night, and I note that because, as usual in today's world, it falls into conservative and liberal commentators on this on the cable airwaves. But one said, as a matter of history, votes like this seldom flip when you're talking about thousands of votes. We remember in Bush-Gore 2000, we were talking 500 some odd
600,
votes.
I believe, yeah.
It still didn't flip. From an historical perspective, even as we see all this, what is your sense of where this will typically lead, if history's a guide? Big if.
Right. With history as a guide, the Gillum DeSantis race, about 35,000. That's a lot of over and under votes, even statewide. When you start talking about the Nelson race...
So back up to Gillum DeSantis.
Sure.
So you think anything could happen, but...
It's not as likely just because you'd have to find a lot of over and under votes to get 35,000 swing.
And we focused a lot on the Senate. We have the Ag Commissioner race that's already flipped to Nikki Fried from Matt Caldwell. We'll see how that plays out.
Right.
The gubernatorial race could go to a hand recount, but you think the over and under vote issue
it's a lot.
Will be a big hill to climb for the Gillum campaign on the Senate side, and then Mr. Feaman's
right.
response.
On the Senate side and at the agriculture side, the numbers are smaller, where it seems to make a little more sense that it might happen if we do the recount. Just with the Gillum race, it's just there's so many out there.
To clarify, do you think we're going to end up on a hand recount with all these races?
It's possible, sure, much more possible than the other one.
And Mr. Feaman,
with the governor's race, I think the governor's race is done and over. In fact, the statute allows Mr. Gillum, if he wanted to say, we can dispense with the recount. It's not necessary. But then on the Senate race, that's a lot closer. But I think at the end of the day, Rick Scott will be the next senator for the United States Senate.
And a lot of people, whatever their political view about what's going on, are saying, once again, you hear it's not funny, but you hear the Florida again, Broward and Palm Beach County, in the middle of all this. And a lot of people are saying, in a day and age when we can get information that is so granular and we can get it so quickly, why can't we get this right? And what needs to be done yet again to ensure in any race, and particularly close ones, that you can vote, gather the votes, count the votes, and be done.
I don't think anything has to be done, because 65 other counties in the state of Florida had no problem following the law and getting their results in on time.
Well, we don't know that because the spotlight's on those other counties. These type of problems may occur in a lot of counties. We just don't know about it. But to get to your question, high technology is capable of being infiltrated. High technology in some ways would make this process so much easier, but it's also so much more vulnerable for the same reasons. And people institutionally, especially in this state, are afraid to go to something where there could be voter fraud at an electronic level.
Before you put your Thanksgiving turkey in the oven, do you think we'll be done by Thanksgiving? Your thought on that, and then your closing argument, Mr. Feaman.
We will not be done if somehow the result of the election gets flipped from Rick Scott to Senator Nelson. We will not be done.
Lawsuits awaiting.
Yes.
Sir?
I think every vote needs to be counted. This process is mandated by statute.
Every legal vote needs to be counted.
Absolutely, every legal vote. And when Pete said before that there's 35,000 new Democratic ballots being counted, well, if those people actually voted, they should be counted.
Quick question on legal votes before we go. Some people are saying if you don't know how to fill out a ballot properly, and are we going to get into this? What's the intent of the voter? Where should we be there? What's the public responsibility for being able to fill out a ballot correctly? Because you're going to see that come into play too.
The same responsibility it's always been, and that's why we have a canvassing board to divine the intent of the voter as best we can.
I'm glad you mentioned the canvassing board, because one of the things that came out in court on Friday was that there was votes being duplicated, ballots being duplicated before they went to the canvassing board. That's pretty shady conduct right there. Robust debate. We appreciate you both being part of it. We'll keep your numbers on our hotline. I have a feeling we're going to have you back to discuss this a good bit more, but we appreciate the perspective. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks as much. Coming up, a look at the politics of the recount with our analyst.